But I got thrown out of the UK's biggest retailer for not reducing my price on a £1 million contract. And at that time, this retailer was the third largest in the world after Walmart and Nordstrom. It made me wake up to the fact that I was quite a good negotiator, but quite good wasn't good enough.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to the Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at the Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Vaughn Johnson, Doug Bowers, and Carl Walsh.
If you want to save time, save money, and get results faster, listen to the Oval Table and learn from experts who will give you their best advice.
Well, we have with us at the table today Derek Arden, who is one of the premier experts on negotiation in the UK and also in the United States. His book, Win-Win, is an Amazon bestseller, and we certainly encourage you to check that out. But in the meantime, we want to spend a little time with Derek and find out exactly how to conduct a negotiation, the tools that you should be looking out for, and the mindset that you need. Derek, welcome to the table.
Hi, Carl. Thanks so much for inviting me. 5,000 miles away from you guys on the west coast of the US. I'm 30 miles from London, and it's a great pleasure to be with you.
We're very pleased to have you. Now, Derek, you didn't start out to be a negotiator. That wasn't really in your life plan. Can you tell us how you got into it?
My dad, at 17, marched me down to Barclays Bank and said, you better get a job in a bank, because I wanted a job in a bank, and I was an estate agent, and I was sent to North Africa to fight the Germans for 5 years, and I missed out on a lot of my life. So get a real job with a bank and you can play sport. And I got a job with a bank. I had to make the tea at first, but I quickly spotted that the smart people were smart and they were learning. And so I quickly took my bank exams and passed those before people got out of college, and got a smart job in the bank. And I guess I pushed myself. But what was the turning point was when I got a job, first of all, in training and coaching. I was passionate about helping people and teaching people. And then I realized that the sort of banking skills, insurance skills weren't what it was all about. It was more the soft skills, but I never call negotiation soft skills. And if people do, I'm after them. They're success skills, they're power skills, they're bottom line skills, which are absolutely crucial to anyone's success. And within negotiation, of course, we got pitching, presenting, selling, haggling, influencing, and all those skills. But I got thrown out of the UK's biggest retailer for not reducing my price on a £1 million contract. And at that time, this retailer was the third largest in the world after Walmart and Nordstrom. It made me wake up to the fact that I was quite a good negotiator, but quite good wasn't good enough. You had to be pretty good to be at that top table, or the oval table, as you might say. And so I went out that night and bought a book. The only book was written by a Brit. All the books on negotiation were written by Americans at that time. And they were pretty sort of win-lose, fairly hardball, what I would have called the John Wayne style of negotiating, rather than the win-win. They weren't the work that was happening at Harvard at that time in Getting to Yes by Fisher and Urey in the Harvard Negotiating Project, which was actually about trying to get compromise and peace in the Middle East, in Italy, in Israel and Palestine. And when I started reading about the subject and studying the subject, I realized how little I knew. But what an exciting subject it was because it covered every aspect of psychology. And I kind of think that Dale Carnegie wrote the first book on it, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because that said, put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you can help the other person get what they want, you will get what you want. So I got excited about it, this area of psychology, and I became better at it. I became better at my boss's boss. I started studying body language, neurolinguistics, language people used, the tactics of negotiation, how not to be bullied. And I just got fascinated by it. I started teaching it, even though still I had a difficult job in Barclays, but with a goal to leave at the first opportunity when I could negotiate a good deal, and to go off and teach it, because I was passionate about teaching, passionate about helping people, and I've been privileged to be able to do that for the last number of years. So that's the story, Carl, and I've had a great journey. I've traveled the world, I've spoken in 33 countries, and it's been great.
As an example of great negotiators, you say in your book that children are great negotiators. Why? How does that work?
Well, you've just got to look at children, Carl, and watch them playing mum off against dad, granny off against mum, etc. I got this theory, I don't know if this is right, but this is what I tell people, that when you're born, you pop your head out your mum's womb, you have a look round, find out what it's all about, and you feel a bit hungry. And you cry, and actually you cry and you get fed. You think, oh, this is how it works. So all I got to do is cry and make a fuss, and people feed me. I like this, but I've worked for people who still employ that at age 50. In other words, bullying people into submission. When you negotiate, you've got to be able to stand up to the bullies. You've got to be able to stand up to the hedge funds. You've got to be able to stand up to some of the politicians. But you don't want to take them on head to head. You want to sort of come from a different angle and suggest things. If you take a bully on, they'll just want to bully you back, whereas you need to do it in a more subtle win-win way. And sometimes you have to let them think it's their idea, actually, to be honest.
In thinking about the what you call the John Wayne negotiating style, where you have the lone gunman walking into the room, and he's only one person's going to walk out alive. I know you very strongly urge that people have a negotiating team, that you not do it alone. Could you discuss that?
Sure. Well, the problem is if you go to a negotiation on your own, there's so many things going on. You clearly need to know what your goals are. You clearly need to know what your strategy and your tactics are. But if you go on your own, it's very difficult to read the body language, the signs and the signals that other people are giving out. I know it's old hat, but left brain, right brain. The left brain is the logical side. The right brain is the emotional side, looking at the body language. And neuroscience has moved on, but I think it's still a great metaphor. And you need someone watching the body language when you're under pressure. Now, when you're haggling, you're going to be under a lot of pressure. Your blood pressure is likely to be up. Your heartbeat's likely to be up. And you're not likely to be thinking straight. I was in a negotiation with a retailer in the UK. And I was actually with somebody else, but I wasn't sure he was on my side. I thought he'd been got at by the other side, because this was in Liverpool. And he was a Liverpool guy, even though he worked for Barclays. And I thought it was 5-1, really, because he was urging me to do the first deal that came up, which we didn't want to do, we didn't need to do, etc. So you need someone with you. You need someone who's definitely on your side, who you've briefed and you've debriefed, understands the agenda, and they watch and they observe. And when you're ready, you take a time out, or as Bill Urey calls it, to going to the balcony in his Harvard book, and you just take a break and you assess the situation. In other words, you recess to reassess the situation. And so many people make the mistake of agreeing to something in the room because they've been pressurized, not taking a break, not consulting their colleague, or sometimes not even sleeping on it. And the reason we say sleep on it is because our brain needs a rest when it's tired. We assimilate all the information we've taken in during the day, but it's unlikely we can do it as the tireder we get, which is why often we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning with an idea that we just couldn't think about the day before. So I'm a great believer in sleeping on things, taking a break, taking a time out, thinking it through before you make a irrational decision that the other side might be trying to bully you into. So, yeah. But if you had a big team and on a big negotiation, I would say you want an observer, you want a note taker, and you want an expert. And be careful of the experts, because often the experts are often on the side of the other experts. So I always say, make sure the expert doesn't talk to the other expert on the other side and give valuable information away because they're not on the same page as you as a negotiator. You need someone you can trust, and you need someone who gets it. It gets what you're trying to achieve and only speaks when you want them to speak. Because I've had an observer with me, and the other side said, well, we can't do it at that price or something. You've got to sharpen your price. And I've said we can't. And he said we can. So that messes the whole thing up, So again, you've got to, one person's got to be in control till you take that break, till you go out of the room.
Derek, a lot of us have been, all of us have been in lockdown to one degree or another internationally for the last 18 months. The art of negotiating has been challenged by the fact that you're not in the room and that you can't observe firsthand the full body language. No. You're really just kind of looking at a talking head. How do you address that? Because I'm not sure that that's going to go away completely at any time soon.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Vaughn. Actually, I forecast we'll have hybrid negotiations. We will have eyeball-to-eyeball negotiations because we probably need to put ourselves out when it's really important. But we'll have a lot of negotiations over Zoom or Teams or whatever. I do contend that you can watch the body language. People have said to me, you can't. I think you can, actually. So I've written an article on this, and my article basically says, number one, organise the call if you can. So you're in control of the switches and the knobs, because if you want to record it, basically, and clearly you've got their permission to record it, but if you record it, you've got the recording. If they record it, they've got the recording, and you can ask them to send it to you, but they just might not. We all know people forget to send it. You've got the recording. You're in control. You can open up the links 5 minutes early, so you're there. I mean, the rule on Zoom is don't be on time, be early. So they come in, you can greet them, which is what I always say to people, if we're negotiating face-to-face, get there 10 minutes early, choose the best seat in the house, the seat you want, put the person who's with you next to you, and take the power position. I think the same applies to Zoom in a different way. And then be professional. Make sure you've got a good background. Make sure you look slick. Make sure you dress up for it. I've just spoken to a Chartered Institute of Management Accountants conference from where I am now, and I put a suit and tie on to make the point to them that if you look good and you look expensive, then they'll probably think you're expensive and pay you a bit more. Who knows? But there's some funny stuff works in the brain. Then have an observer. They can be 50 miles away, or they could be the other side of the States on Zoom, and they can watch the body language. Then you take a break, you take a time out, go to the balcony, and you switch Zoom off. You go into another room and you call them on their cell phone. And you say, what did you see? What do you think? How much do you think we have to come down to close this deal? Because generally, when you take a break and a time out, you don't have to come down as much as the lead negotiator thinks they have to come down when they're under that emotional pressure or attack and they want to close the deal. So the observer says, well, I think if we came off, if we came off, 4%, we might be able to close the deal. And if we have to go down to 4.5%, but, not go to 5, not go to 10, let's go in funny numbers. Funny numbers are always good. Let's go down 4.6%. They'll never know why. They'll think we've worked it out carefully. If we go down 4.6%, you go down to 5%, people think, I just picked a number out the air. They've obviously got more to give if we put them under pressure. Yeah, if it's important, you should never negotiate on your own. Never, ever. Why would you? You know, 5,000, you know, $5 million deal or $1 million deal or $200,000 deal. They're big numbers, and 10% is on your bottom line, isn't it? An extra 10% is straight into your bottom line profit. People seem to forget that.
You actually predicted my next question, which is, give us an example of some of the common body language movements that negotiators should pay attention to.
Okay, well, the first one is Pinocchio rubbed his nose every time he told a lie. Now, people try and ha-ha that, but Walt Disney knew that. And if you go to Italy, you go to Verona or Venice, where Pinocchio was drawn, the cartoon character, you'll see these great big noses that they're selling. And why did his nose grow every time he told a lie? Because people tend to rub their noses when they're lying, regular people. Next one, arms folded. You ask a question, I move back and I fold my arms. I don't like the question, do I? I don't like the pressure I'm being put under. You ask me a question, I move forward. That's a buying signal. Moving backwards is a non-buying signal. If you're picking these up, these are valuable pieces of information. They're not 100% right. We know that. But they're 70-30 or 80-20. They're giving us a lot more information than not watching it. The next one is a very confident gesture called steepling, where you put your fingertips together and it's a very confident gesture because your fingers will shake if you're not confident. So it's a very confident gesture. If you're playing poker with someone that's doing that, you need to know whether they're playing a game with you or they're not. So and then the next one is where you put the hands in a praying gesture. And virtually all over the world, that means the same thing, that you're looking or listening or trying to suss out some divine intervention. Rubbing your ear, don't like what I'm hearing. Rubbing your eyes, don't like what I'm seeing. Clearly, if you're in selling, people need to see your eyes. So you need clear spectacles, not ones that go dark. And also, perhaps you need non-reflective lenses. If people don't want to fold their arms, they like to fold their ankles. Folding ankles is said to be a sign of still got some more to give away in the negotiation. So I'm folding my ankles, but I don't want you to see me folding my arms because that would be too much of a giveaway. Then you got the fidgeting. Prince Charles puts his hands behind his back because he's generally nervous and he's fiddling with his hands and he thinks he can't be seen doing that. So I've been fascinated by body language. What I would say to people, if they think they're an amateur at it, we're not. No one's an amateur at it. It's obvious. You know, people go red in the face when they're a bit embarrassed. Some women go red at the top of their chest. I say, well, if you do that, don't worry about it. But if you get a bit hot and go a bit red when you're under pressure, whip your jacket off first and keep cool and don't drink a hot drink because you're going to look like you're under pressure. Drink a glass of cold water. So manage your own body. What we're really looking for is when people aren't telling us the truth, and that's when we need to ask good questions there, don't we?
I think there are a number of things here that are kind of interesting. One is that you never go alone, that you actually have a team that goes with you. In essence, you take your oval table with you to a negotiation. And around the oval table sits, in our case, as we define it, sits 7 different people with 7 different skill sets, 7 different emotional antenna that pick up different things. Now, in your pattern, what you might do is not take, well, some of those people would not be good in a negotiating table. So you leave them behind. It doesn't mean they haven't been consulted. It doesn't mean you haven't talked about your project or your objective with them ahead of time. And so you're taking their thoughts and their comments with you to the negotiation. You're going with a more strategic sub-team than the entire table.
And I think that sub-team is very important, Doug. You are quite right about not taking people with lower emotional intelligence who wouldn't know to stop talking and didn't know to chip in. I mean, I've taken somebody with me by mistake, and I've had to kick them under the table to stop them talking, because actually, when you're talking, you're giving the other side information, and when they're talking, they're giving you information. So ask them good, open questions like, run it past me. What's the difference between our offer and the offer that you're telling me is cheaper? And shutting up, because I've been with somebody who said, well, we know that, Derek, already. Well, I'm asking a Columbo question there. You remember, everyone remembers Peter Falk, the actor in Columbo, who used to ask the dumbest smart question, which is the ones I like. I don't quite understand this. I don't quite get it. Well, most of the time you do get it. You just want them to tell it to you again, and you want to hear them either tell fibs, lies, or explain it in a different way so that you can pick up other clues, or they might not tell it quite in the same way. And when you're up against a really professional negotiating team, just imagine the negotiation teams that Boeing take, and people like that. They must be huge, mustn't they, to sell 737s to Southwest Airlines or to Ryanair or whatever it is. Huge. And, on the other end, Ryanair, the guy that runs Ryanair out of Ireland, he's a real tough negotiator, negotiates in the press all the time if he's not getting his own way. And then you wouldn't, someone like Richard Branson, you wouldn't underestimate Richard Branson, would you? He looks a nice guy, but you can imagine how tough he is. Elon Musk, I mean, they're up against each other, aren't they? Trying to get to the moon with sending people up into the stars and things like that, or negotiating with the Chinese for a nuclear power plant. Gee, these, you just can't imagine what it's
Derek,
like.
can you give us an example of different negotiating styles based on region, based on country and culture?
Yeah, well, clearly it depends on the people. So there's no sweeping statement, but generally the view is that Americans are tougher negotiators than Europeans, and this is seriously sweeping statement. But you've asked me the question, so I'll give you my take on it. But Americans are a little bit don't like so much small talk. Let's get on with the negotiation. Let's get on with the deal. Whereas the Europeans might slow it down and like a bit more rapport building. And if you move into the Middle East, you could go to the Middle East and spend 2 days building rapport, because they're not going to do a deal with you until they understand you, trust you, know a bit about your family, your background, and all this. And they're going to want to negotiate with the top person. They're not going to negotiate with the people who've been sent in the first place. And then, you go into the Latin American cultures again, which are a little bit slower, a little bit more ponderous, a little bit more family orientated, maybe a bit more win-win. Yeah, there's a lot. I talk in win-win about cultural negotiations. I put about 8 pages in, took some advice from a lot of people. But at the end of the day, you need to do your research. The real answer is, if you're going to negotiate with South Korea, then you need to find out before you go what the cultural issues are, whether you should take a present, whether you should build rapport, how long you're likely to be there. In Japan, after the Second World War, when there was all those negotiations going on to try and rebuild Japan and get contracts, there was a number of stories that the Japanese used to meet you at the airport, take your ticket, ask you when you were returning home, give you 6 days of tours of Tokyo, and then bring the negotiations to a head 2 hours before your plane flew back to California. Because we were talking earlier about 80% of the negotiations come in the last 20% of the negotiation time. And if you can put people under pressure, particularly personal pressure, because they want to get home, they're likely to get down to their walk-away position or lower even quicker, which is what you don't want to do.
Now, you've just mentioned the walk-away point, which, if you've done your homework, well, you know what your walk-away point is. But how do you detect the other side's walk away point without them walking away?
Well, you do ask difficult questions, Carl. Well, first, let's talk about our walkaway position. First of all, I would recommend having a best position, your dream position, because if you're a consultant or some of the clients you work with, they will get that price occasionally. Then a target position, which is where you might start at, where you might be very happy to end up, and then your walkaway position. And you should have a soft walkaway and a hard walkaway. And what I mean by soft is you walk away today and you say, that's the best we can do today, which means you haven't put yourself in a corner and you said today, and therefore tomorrow you could ring them up and say, look, we've been looking at this, been running the numbers. Maybe if there's something you can do here, pay us in advance or whatever, then maybe we can meet you halfway or something. So don't put yourself in a corner and storm out and walk out and say, that's it, we're never doing business with you again, because you might just change your mind. You never know. And then having an alternative position, or as Harvard call it, a BAT, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I call it an alternative position. BATNA didn't translate very well my side of the Atlantic, so I changed it to an alternative position. In other words, if you walk away, what are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do with the factory? What are you going to do with the resources? You're going to have to lay people off. What's that's going to cost? Factor that into your calculations, or perhaps you can use it better. Use the capital better to start a new business or invest in Silicon Valley or whatever it might be. They're business decisions. But what would you do? I mean, if you were, let's say you were Southwest Airlines and you decided you're going to negotiate with Boeing, or were you going to negotiate with the European consortium, which his name escapes me at the moment, but there's only two makers of airlines, aren't there, in the world? You do your research. What price are they selling it to other people? How did it go? What were the deals? And you'd make calls. I mean, one of the reasons to have a fantastic network and LinkedIn is that you can find somebody that might tell you some of that information. So, I got 5,500 followers on LinkedIn. They're not people I know, but they're people I could know. LinkedIn's the business networking site for the world. So
I'm reminded of what Warren Buffett had to say about playing bridge, which is somewhat of a negotiation team or negotiation game. In the first 5 minutes, if you don't know who the patsy is, you're it. And that might be something that one would pay attention to going in. That
sounds very John Wayne.
That is a bit John Wayne, yeah.
Our listeners are likely to be on a smaller scale in terms of negotiating. And I wanted to get at two aspects that would affect them. One is size of team. If you're faced with a situation where there's two of you and you're faced with 5 people on the other side, how do you kind of shift that negotiation so it's more of at least a neutral position?
Well, that has happened to me, Doug, and it's a great question. And if you know there's going to be 5, I'd try and turn up with 5 if you can afford it, because it balances the psychology of the numbers. Because there's 5 of them and 2 of you, you're going to be under pressure unconsciously, whether you like it or not. So you would ask, who will be meeting, and then you could field another 3 if you wanted to. Now, you need a reason to field the 3, don't you? And they need to be briefed properly so they don't let you down. They need roles, but you can make up roles, and you can balance it that way. If you can't balance it, I might say, oh, well, there's 5 of you. We didn't know that you were bringing in 5. There's just a couple of us. What are your roles? And put them under pressure. Now, I know I teach at a business school. There was a guy at a business school was telling me a negotiation. He went to South Korea on his own to negotiate with Samsung. They turned up with 33 people on the other side. He was on his own. I said, I didn't believe him. You know, when you say to someone, well, that's unbelievable, isn't it? And he said, well, they did. He got a bit stroppy with me because it was obviously true. He said they were in rows. They were in 3 rows, hierarchical rows, which is what happens with the Koreans. So you had the manufacturing guys at the back, you had the middle management in the middle, and you had the boss and the directors at the front. And that was it. Anyway, he didn't get the deal done. He flew home and he had a nervous breakdown from the pressure of it. And the same I've had the same story in the Middle East as well, in Dubai. And it was an Asian lady who was working for a construction company, and she turned up on her own and went into a meeting with nine people. That's not to be advised, is it? That is not to be advised. I said, well, you go with one of your colleagues to their negotiations and they come to your negotiations. You'll learn so much about negotiations just being an observer and not in the firing line. And they can give you moral support. They can watch the body language. They can give you an overview that you don't see when you're under pressure.
I frequently have been negotiating from a position of you don't give information away. How effective is the style of, or how ineffective is the style of really not giving information away, or not telling people that you're happy with something, but you're just, you're being drugged through all this?
I think under the rule of reciprocity, this is my take as I've got older, the Robert Cialdini psychology, the law of reciprocity, it's probably worth giving something away at the beginning, but not something very valuable. I think giving nothing away, playing hardball, is a bit of a waste of time, really, a bit of a waste of everybody's time. If you do want to do a deal, maybe you don't want to do a deal, well, make your mind up and move on. I think it's a waste of time. I think we need to move it on, Doug, and I think we need to say we're not making much progress here. Do you think it is possible to get a deal? Do you think we can get a win-win? I think that's a great question. It might be the title of my book, but I didn't pick the title. The publisher picked it. But I think it's a great title if you get a bit stuck. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't seem to be making much progress here. Do you think we can achieve a win-win? Now, when you ask that question, you shut up and your team watches their reactions. And you might watch the reactions of the patsy, as you called it, Doug, of the weakest member of the link who hasn't been briefed properly and gives their body language away. Because they certainly, most people won't have briefed their teams.
Well, if I was negotiating for a vehicle or for a piece of equipment, and it was just like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 type situation, no matter how happy I was, I would never tell them I'm happy.
Oh, yeah.
I would never tell them I want a red car because I love red. Never give that information away.
I think it's great. I think car salespeople are very skilled. The good ones are hugely skilled, hugely good at asking you questions before you actually get into the price negotiations. So I went out and interviewed a Porsche dealer in the UK in Bournemouth, who was hugely successful. And he'd sold me a couple of years before a Volkswagen. He'd said to me at the time, he said, Derek, you didn't know half the negotiations. You might have written a book on this, but you didn't know half the sales negotiations tricks I did on you. I didn't use the word tricks. That's not a good word to use. So he said, did you know when you went to do the test drive, I got in the driving seat first and drove the car out of the parking lot. But did you know I pushed the seat back and I moved the wing mirror? So when you got in the car, you had to adjust it. So you felt you already owned the car. I asked you some qualifying questions when you were turning at that difficult road junction about what you were looking for. So he'd asked me a lot of these qualifying questions, Doug, when I didn't know he was asking them and I was concentrating on something else. So I was answering them, what would you prefer, a red or a blue car or a red car or something? So you are quite right, but the skilled ones are red hot.
If you're outgunned, in other words, if the other side has more skills, more training, and whatever than you do, is an effective tactic trying to always pull them off guard. or pull them in a different direction. If I don't understand what you're talking about, whatever, just to try and pull them, just to try and make them uneasy and unassured of their position so they cannot march down a familiar path.
I think it depends on the circumstances. I noticed you used the word outgunned, so I guess that's the John Wayne style of negotiation there. You can see my listening skills are really switched on. That's what most people don't do. They don't listen to every word that people use and play it back. I would say to you, if we were negotiating, I'd say, well, I think you're outgunning me at the moment, playing your words back, Doug. I'm not really sure if you do want a win-win here. You're a fantastic negotiator. I can tell that from the way you go about it. Much more skilled than me, of course. I'm just I'm just an ordinary guy from London that's come over to the US to negotiate. I would like to get a deal, but I think it's going to be really tricky for what you're asking for. If you do want a win-win, I guess we better get down to it. I think one of the things you can do, if you say, do we want to get a win-win, and then you could perhaps get a flip chart out. I've got a flip chart here. I carry a flip chart everywhere. Let's get all the facts on the table. Let's see where you're coming from. Let's see where we're coming from. Let's see if we can find some middle ground.
Well, Derek, we go to no ends to find people that can help our listeners do better. And negotiating is certainly a technical strategy. It's a technical area, and we appreciate your insights to help us do better.
Thanks so much, and let's have a win-win. And I look forward to meeting you face-to-face rather than on Zoom. Thanks very much for inviting me.
So Derek Arden is a master of negotiations. He's written the book. And today we want to talk a little bit about some of the negotiating nuggets that he dropped during the course of that interview. For me, having worked internationally for most of my career, the thing I was drawn to was the difference between different cultures with respect to negotiation. I can tell you that negotiating with the Chinese, with the Japanese is different than negotiating with Germans or with Scandinavians. And if you understand those cultures and you're able to put yourself in the shoes of the opposing party, if you will, it is a huge benefit going into any kind of negotiation. Understanding not only what do they want, but how do we get to what we want? That's a big part of it.
Well, culture is kind of a nuanced sort of thing in the sense that it isn't just the general presentation that the country makes, but it gets right down to words and motions and expressions and what you comment on, what you don't comment on, how you interrupt somebody else. That's all part of Derek's definition of culture. And you have subcultures within your main culture. For example, as he was pointing out, that in England, there's a certain way of doing things which is different than the United States way of doing things. And that's on the large scale. But if you're in a larger city, you typically have multiple cultures within that city. And so you might be, certainly in Los Angeles here, you basically have every culture that exists here. And on one hand, you might be dealing with one culture in the morning, and you might be dealing with another culture in the afternoon. When you have a closely held business and you're selling to somebody else, which is, of course, what you have to do, you're also selling in terms of different culture. And your different customers could have various different cultures, and you need to not sort of step on forward progress by how you interplay within that culture. So you have to be extremely sensitive. You know, a widget's not a widget. A widget comes with a culture connected to it, and it's different on the receiving end than it is on the giving end. So one needs to keep that in mind.
One of the takeaways that I got, he has some really intriguing strategies that some I've thought of, some I haven't, which is, first of all, to begin with, match the numbers. If the people you are negotiating with bring 5 people, you bring 5 people. Don't ever leave yourself in the situation where you're overwhelmed by numbers. That just is a psychological thing. But if you bring 5 people, they all have to be on the same page as you. They know where you're heading so that they don't undercut your argument. One person leads, and actually it's probably a good idea that you've got somebody who's watching body language on the other side, really focusing on that. You've got another person who's taking notes while the negotiator is doing that job of negotiating. Another one that I found very intriguing was to break the negotiation up. Take a break. Go out to the balcony. Talk to your people. The person watching the body language, what did they see? Where did they see a change in body language? The person making the notes, what stood out for them? Gather all that information that happened first. And even if you're doing this on Zoom, fine. Break the meeting. Get them on the phone. Take a break. But really, you're not taking a break. You're strategizing the next steps based on the information that you've collected during the first part. And finally, something that I've always felt. Now, the name of Derek's book is Win-Win. And I think any successful negotiation should be a win-win, because you may be across the table with them again in another negotiation, and you want them to have warm fuzzies about that last one. And so using the negotiation tactic that is often used and Derek mentioned it as far as the US goes, the John Wayne approach, which is the only way I can win is if your blood is in the water, may not be the best way to go if you want a continuing relationship with these people. Of course, you want to be a good negotiator. You want to get the best that you can get for your company, but he laid out how to do that in a way that is not offensive and that everyone does walk away feeling like, okay, I got what I needed. Maybe I didn't get everything I wanted, but I got what I needed. And that's a win-win.
Well, one of the things he said was, essentially is listening with your team around the table in different perspectives, because different people, because if you're the one doing the speaking, you're not listening. But listening is not offensive. Listening is just a way to gather information in very specific ways. And if your team is so orientated, then the team is doing substantially only listening. And that generates a great deal of information. His website, of course, and Derek has a lot of materials that one could download from that. But one of his first nuggets is preparation. That you have to prepare for these negotiations. You cannot go into them cold, and you have to prepare with a team, and each of the team members have different roles in that preparation. And they bring those preparations to the negotiation. And of course, in essence, what he's doing is he's forming an oval table of his team, and then getting themselves organized and getting themselves listening for very specific things and prepared to discuss things, and they're going forth with an oval table team. And that's probably the ideal way of going about it.
If you are looking for a competitive advantage, I encourage you to look at the words you use when you promote, speak, and sell. I can help. Talk to me. fripp.com.
We all hope you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time here at the Oval Table.